Daniel had always been a diligent worker. From the moment he joined the company, he poured himself into every task, hoping to prove that he belonged among such talented and experienced colleagues. His office was small but neat, with a large window that let in the fading light of the evening. Tonight, like many nights before, he was staying late to finish a report that was due the next morning. The office was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional rustle of papers. He was tired, but he didn't want to leave things half done. Daniel liked to keep a clear conscience and make sure his work was accurate. The presentation tomorrow was important, and the client was expecting detailed analysis. Daniel leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he reviewed the data one last time. As he scrolled through the spreadsheets, he felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him. His mind began to wander for just a second. It was in that brief moment that he accidentally glanced up at something across the room. He didn't mean to look. It was a careless, split-second motion, and before he could even react, realized that Ms. Thompson, his boss, had seen him. She was standing near the doorway, holding a stack of papers, and her eyes met his. There was no doubt in Daniel's mind that she had noticed. For a fraction of a second, everything froze in his head. His heart started to race, and a hot wave of embarrassment swept over him. He quickly looked away, pretending to focus intently on the spreadsheet. But the damage in his mind was already done. Daniel's palms became clammy. He could feel the sweat forming on the back of his neck. He had never wanted to make a bad impression on Ms. Thompson. She was respected by everyone in the office for her sharp mind and fair leadership. Daniel had always admired her professionalism and the way she handled difficult situations with grace. Now he felt as if he had ruined that perception, all in a careless glance. Ms. Thompson didn't say anything. She simply placed the papers on a nearby table and gave him a look that Daniel couldn't quite read. It wasn't angry, but it wasn't approving either. Just that look, calm yet piercing, made Daniel feel as if she could see right through him. He stared at his screen, pretending to type even though the words made no sense. His mind kept replaying the moment over and over, and the more he thought about it, the worse he felt. He wondered if she would tell others if this would be the story he would hear about at the next meeting. He tried to shake it off, but the anxiety stuck with him like glue. The office clock ticked steadily. Daniel's ears picked up every sound, the faint tap of a keyboard down the hall, the creak of a chair, the soft sigh of the air conditioning. Each noise made him jump, reminding him that he wasn't alone and that Miss Thompson's presence was just a few steps away. He tried to focus back on the report, typing numbers into the spreadsheet, but his thoughts kept wandering. He imagined scenarios in his head. She might scold him tomorrow. She might make a note in his file. She might quietly judge him in meetings. Each imagined scenario seemed more terrifying than the last. He thought about leaving. Maybe if he left the office now, she would forget the whole thing. But he couldn't. He had a responsibility to finish the report. He tried to tell himself that what happened was not a big deal, just a momentary lapse, but his stomach churned with anxiety. He couldn't focus on the numbers. Each cell on the spreadsheet looked like a blur. The clock ticked, and the office remained silent, but Daniel felt trapped, as if he were under a spotlight that only he could see. Finally, he decided to take a short break. He got up and walked to the small kitchenette in the corner. He poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, trying to calm down. His hands shook slightly as he sipped the water. He tried to remind himself of all the times he had handled pressure before. He had met deadlines, managed complex projects, and even led small teams. Yet, in this moment, it felt as if one simple glance had undone all of that. He wanted to tell someone, anyone, to help him feel normal again. But the office was empty, and he couldn't bring himself to call a friend or colleague. The embarrassment was too raw, too immediate. Returning to his desk, Daniel tried a different approach. He took a deep breath and focused on one small part of the report. Just one table, one chart. Slowly, he began entering data, forcing his mind to concentrate. The numbers didn't blur as much anymore, and his heart rate started to lower. Still, the incident with Ms. Thompson lingered in his thoughts, a shadow over his usual confidence. He kept imagining her walking back into the room, saying something, any word, and he would have no clever response. He felt unprepared for the consequences of a simple mistake as he worked. He remembered past advice from his mentor. Mistakes are only as big as you make them in your mind. Daniel repeated this silently to himself, trying to calm the storm inside. Yet, the tension remained. The longer he stayed, the more he worried. He checked the clock again. Another 30 minutes had passed, and the office was still quiet. The hum of the computers and the faint tapping of his keyboard were the only sounds. He realized he was exhausted, but sleep was impossible. His mind kept replaying that fleeting look, that silent acknowledgement from Ms. Thompson. Hours passed, and the office lights dimmed as the night deepened. Daniel continued working, typing and reviewing, forcing himself to ignore the lingering dread. He told himself that by finishing the report perfectly, he could redeem himself, at least in his own mind. He focused on every detail, every number, every chart. He triple-checked calculations and formatting, hoping that this dedication would somehow erase the moment that now felt monumental in his head. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the report was done. Daniel leaned back in his chair, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. His fingers were stiff from hours of typing, his eyes sore from staring at the screen, but the task was complete. Yet the incident with Miss Thompson still loomed over him, an invisible weight he couldn't shake. He wondered if the next day would be awkward, if she would treat him differently. If his own embarrassment had created a permanent fissure in their professional relationship. Before leaving, he glanced around the office. Everything seemed calm and normal, but Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The small, everyday interactions that had once seemed routine now felt fragile and uncertain. He took a deep breath, gathered his belongings, and stepped into the cool night air outside. The streets were quiet, the city lights flickering softly in the distance. As he walked home, Daniel tried to remind himself that tomorrow was another day, that maybe Ms. Thompson would not make a big deal of it, that perhaps he was overthinking everything. Still, the unease stayed with him, quiet companion, alongside his tired mind and weary body. By the time Daniel reached his apartment, he felt both relieved and anxious. He had survived the night, completed his work, yet the uncertainty of what tomorrow might bring kept him restless. He knew he needed rest, but sleep would not come easily. He lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the incident again and again, analyzing every detail of that brief moment. The memory was sharp, clear, and persistent, refusing to fade. As he finally closed his eyes, Daniel realized something. No matter how uncomfortable this moment felt, it was only one night, one glance, one tiny lapse. Yet in his mind, it had grown into something much larger. He understood that tomorrow would bring answers, clarity, and perhaps a chance to face this embarrassment head-on. With that thought, he allowed himself to drift into a restless, uneasy sleep. Unaware that this one small incident was about to change the way he and Miss Thompson would relate forever, the next morning, Daniel arrived at the office earlier than usual. The air outside was crisp, and the streets were quiet as he walked briskly, trying to shake off the nervous energy from last night. His mind was still tangled with thoughts about Ms. Thompson and the moment that had haunted him. Each step he took felt heavier because of the weight of anticipation. He knew he had to act normal, but every part of him wanted to shrink into invisibility. As he entered the office, he noticed the usual bustle of coworkers preparing for the day, chatting softly and setting up their workstations. He smiled politely at a few familiar faces, but inside he felt isolated. The incident from yesterday lingered in his mind like a shadow. Daniel had always been self-conscious about how others perceived him, and now he felt like everyone could somehow sense his embarrassment. Even if they couldn't, he quickly settled at his desk and tried to immerse himself in the morning tasks, hoping that keeping busy would calm his nerves. However, as the minutes passed, he became acutely aware of every movement around him. Every laugh, every tap on a keyboard, every shuffle of papers sounded amplified. He caught glimpses of Miss Thompson walking by, her presence commanding without effort. Daniel tried to meet her eyes, but each time he did, he felt a pang of anxiety. He kept telling himself that she was a professional, that she understood human moments, but his heart refused to listen. The tension was unbearable, and his focus on work was slipping. Throughout the morning, Daniel noticed subtle changes in Ms. Thompson's behavior. She didn't speak to him harshly or make any overt remarks, but she seemed slightly more distant than usual. He could feel a quiet observation in her gaze, a cautious distance that made him hyper-aware of his every action. His normally confident stride felt clumsy, his emails seemed inadequate, and even simple greetings felt strained. Every interaction was colored by the memory of last night, and he couldn't escape the feeling that he had permanently altered her perception of him. During a brief break, Daniel went to the kitchenette to get some coffee. He bumped into a coworker, someone who had always been friendly and supportive. They exchanged casual words about the weather and upcoming projects, but Daniel struggled to engage fully. His mind kept wandering back to Ms. Thompson's look, replaying the scene like a loop he couldn't stop. His coworker noticed the distracted expression on Daniel's face and offered some reassurance. They reminded him that everyone has awkward moments, and that bosses usually don't hold grudges over minor lapses. Daniel nodded, trying to take comfort, but the tension didn't ease. It was like trying to push down a river with his hands. The anxiety always found a way back to the surface. Back at his desk, Daniel attempted to focus on the client presentation that was scheduled for later in the day. He reviewed slides, rehearsed his talking points, and double-checked data, hoping that meticulous preparation would compensate for his lingering unease. But each time Ms. Thompson walked by, he felt a subtle tightening in his chest. He imagined her scrutinizing his work, noticing every flaw, even those that weren't there. His self-consciousness grew with every passing hour, and he found himself second-guessing decisions he normally would have made confidently. By midday, Daniel's stress was beginning to affect his work. Small mistakes started to creep into his calculations, and he had to go back repeatedly to correct them. Normally, he would have worked efficiently, but today, the mental distraction of the incident had slowed him down. He felt trapped in a loop of worry and correction, unable to break free. He thought about the possibility of apologizing preemptively, but he didn't know the right words or whether it would even be necessary. The thought of directly confronting Ms. Thompson made his stomach churn. Yet, the tension was growing unbearable, and he knew he couldn't continue like this indefinitely. During lunch, Daniel retreated to a quiet corner of the office cafeteria. He ate slowly, barely tasting his food, his mind consumed by every interaction from the morning. He noticed colleagues laughing and chatting around him, and he envied their ease. He thought about how natural they seemed, free from the weight of self-consciousness that now dominated his every move. The thought made him feel isolated, as if he were experiencing the day through a lens that distorted reality. He wanted to disappear, to be invisible until the anxiety faded. But he couldn't. After lunch, Daniel returned to his desk, determined to regain some composure. He focused on one task at a time, breaking the work into small, manageable pieces. Slowly, he started to find a rhythm, his fingers moving more confidently across the keyboard. Yet every time the office door opened, his heart jumped. Ms. Thompson appeared occasionally, checking in with different teams, and each sighting made him tense. He tried to remind himself that she was professional, that she wouldn't dwell on a single glance from yesterday. But rational thought did little to calm the storm of nerves within him. As the afternoon progressed, the anxiety continued to affect him. Daniel realized that the awkward incident was influencing his perception of every interaction. Emails from colleagues seemed scrutinizing. Casual remarks sounded judgmental. Even friendly smiles felt weighted with meaning. He knew this was his mind exaggerating, but he couldn't stop it. The memory of Ms. Thompson's gaze had taken on a disproportionate significance, transforming a momentary lapse into a looming presence in his thoughts. Despite the internal turmoil, Daniel noticed that Ms. Thompson's actions were more measured than he feared. She assigned tasks, offered guidance, and interacted with him in a professional manner, though with a subtle reserve. This observation provided a small sense of relief, a hint that perhaps the incident had not caused permanent damage. Yet the tension in his mind remained. He felt the need to address the issue directly, to clarify and release the weight of anxiety that was affecting his focus and performance. By late afternoon, the stress had built up to a point where Daniel could no longer ignore it. He decided that he needed a private conversation with Ms. Thompson, a chance to acknowledge the incident and explain himself. He rehearsed different ways to approach the topic, trying to find a balance between sincerity and professionalism. Each imagined conversation played out in his mind, with varying outcomes. Some ended in understanding, others in embarrassment. He realized that the fear of the unknown was part of what made the day so difficult, and that facing the situation might be the only way to regain his composure. As the workday drew to a close, Daniel felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. He completed his final tasks, carefully reviewing each one for errors, and then took a deep breath. He knew that he couldn't leave without at least attempting to resolve the tension. The incident had been brief, a mere moment in time, but its impact on his mental state had been profound. He understood that avoiding it would only prolong the discomfort, and that taking action was necessary for both his peace of mind and professional growth. He waited until most of the office had emptied before approaching Ms. Thompson. She was reviewing documents at her desk, focused but aware of her surroundings. Daniel approached cautiously, trying to steady his voice and calm his nerves. The words he had practiced repeated in his mind, yet each step closer made him more anxious. He realized that this was a defining moment, not because of the incident itself, but because of how he chose to handle it. Standing in front of her desk, Daniel took a deep breath. He began to explain, speaking honestly and directly about the brief, unintended glance, and the embarrassment he felt. Miss Thompson listened silently, her expression neutral but attentive. Daniel felt exposed, vulnerable, and anxious, but he pressed on, emphasizing his commitment to his work and professionalism. He wanted to convey that the incident had been a momentary lapse. It's not a reflection of his character or dedication. Ms. Thompson finally spoke, her voice calm and measured. She acknowledged his honesty and reassured him that everyone experiences awkward moments. Her words were kind but firm, emphasizing that professional behavior was important, but that one moment did not define a person's worth or abilities. Daniel felt a wave of relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The tension that had plagued him throughout the day began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious optimism. As Daniel returned to his desk, he realized that the morning's anxiety had been magnified in his mind. The reality of Ms. Thompson's reaction was far less severe than he had imagined. He reflected on how his assumptions and self-consciousness had created unnecessary stress. He vowed to approach future situations with more confidence and clarity. Though the incident had been uncomfortable, it had provided an unexpected lesson in humility, self-awareness, and the importance of addressing issues directly rather than letting fear dictate behavior. By the end of the day, Daniel felt a renewed sense of focus and determination. He completed his remaining tasks efficiently and with greater attention to detail. The office, once a place of tension, now felt manageable. He understood that the path forward would require professionalism, consistent effort, and open communication. The incident, once a source of anxiety, had become a turning point, offering an opportunity for personal growth and the strengthening of his professional relationship with Ms. Thompson. He left the office that evening feeling both relieved and hopeful, aware that the challenges of the day had taught him valuable lessons that he would carry forward. Daniel spent the next morning feeling a mix of determination and nervousness. He knew he could no longer carry the tension of the previous day, and he wanted to address the incident directly. As he walked into the office, he rehearsed what he would say in his mind, hoping he could find the right words that would be sincere, professional, and clear. He reminded himself that honesty was the best approach, and that he needed to speak with Ms. Thompson before the anxiety of the situation continued to affect his work and confidence. The office was alive with the usual morning energy. Colleagues chatting about deadlines and weekend plans. Daniel smiled politely at familiar faces, but his mind was focused on the conversation that awaited him. He checked his watch multiple times, debating whether to approach Ms. Thompson right away or wait until later in the day. Each choice had its own anxiety, and he realized that putting it off would only increase his stress. Finally, he resolved to speak with her as soon as she was free, believing that the sooner he addressed the issue, the sooner he could regain a sense of normalcy. Around mid-morning, he noticed Ms. Thompson in a quiet corner of the office, reviewing some reports. Daniel took a deep breath and walked toward her desk, each step heavy with anticipation. As he approached, he felt a familiar knot in his stomach, a mix of fear, embarrassment, and determination. He stopped just a few feet away, feeling slightly exposed but resolute. Ms. Thompson looked up from her documents and gave a polite nod, acknowledging his presence without a hint of judgment. Daniel appreciated her calm demeanor, though it only made him more aware of his own nervousness. He began to speak, his voice slightly shaky at first. He explained, in clear and simple terms, that the glance the day before was unintentional and that he felt embarrassed about it. He wanted to assure her that it did not reflect his character or professionalism. Daniel emphasized that he valued her guidance and leadership and that he was committed to maintaining a professional and respectful work environment. As he spoke, he noticed that Ms. Thompson remained attentive and composed, listening carefully without interruption. Her calm presence gave him the courage to continue, and he felt a slight relief knowing that she was not reacting negatively. Ms. Thompson responded in a steady, standing voice. She acknowledged that everyone has moments of distraction or minor lapses, and that she appreciated his honesty and willingness to address the situation directly. She explained that professional behavior was important, but that one brief incident did not define a person's abilities or character. Daniel felt a wave of relief wash over him. The weight he had been carrying for the past 2 days began to lift, replaced by a cautious optimism. He realized that confronting the issue head-on had been the right decision, and that avoiding it would have only prolonged his anxiety. The conversation turned to work-related matters, and Ms. Thompson offered constructive feedback on recent projects. Daniel listened attentively, appreciating her insights and guidance. He found that the act of speaking openly about the previous incident had created a subtle shift in their dynamic. The tension that had dominated his interactions with her was gone, replaced by a sense of mutual respect and understanding. He could now focus on the tasks at hand without the cloud of embarrassment hanging over him as the day progressed. Daniel noticed a change in how he perceived his work and his interactions with colleagues. The anxiety that had previously made simple tasks feel overwhelming had dissipated. He felt more confident in his decisions, more willing to take initiative, and more engaged in discussions. The confrontation had not only alleviated the immediate tension with Ms. Thompson, but it also strengthened his overall sense of professionalism and self-assurance. He realized that addressing uncomfortable situations directly, rather than avoiding them, could lead to growth and improved relationships. Throughout the afternoon, Daniel worked closely with Ms. Thompson on a client presentation. Their interactions were professional yet collaborative, and Daniel found that he could communicate more openly without the fear of judgment that had plagued him previously. Ms. Thompson provided guidance and feedback in a supportive manner, and Daniel responded with confidence and clarity. The incident from 2 days prior no longer dominated his thoughts. Instead, it became a lesson in accountability and communication. During a brief break, Daniel reflected on the events of the past few days. He realized that his initial fear had been magnified in his mind, and that the actual situation had been far less severe than he had imagined. He thought about how his assumptions and overthinking had created unnecessary stress and anxiety. This reflection allowed him to approach the rest of the day with a renewed sense of calm and purpose. He understood that facing challenges directly and communicating honestly were essential skills, both professionally and personally. As the workday came to a close, Daniel felt a sense of accomplishment. He had addressed the incident, completed his tasks efficiently, and strengthened his working relationship with Ms. Thompson. The anxiety that had shadowed him for days was replaced by confidence and a clear understanding of the importance of honesty, communication, and professionalism. He left the office with a sense of relief and optimism, aware that the way he had handled the situation would positively influence his future interactions and growth within the company. That evening, as Daniel walked home, he replayed the conversation in his mind. He noted how simple, honest communication had transformed what seemed like a potentially damaging incident into an opportunity for understanding and growth. He felt a newfound respect for Ms. Thompson, appreciating her professionalism, empathy, and the calm way she had handled the situation. At the same time, he felt pride in himself for having the courage to confront the issue directly. Despite the discomfort and nervousness he had initially felt, by the time he reached his apartment, Daniel felt a sense of closure. The incident, once a source of intense anxiety, had become a catalyst for learning and personal development. He reflected on the lessons he had learned, the importance of addressing problems directly, the value of honesty, and the power of empathy in human interactions. These insights would guide his future professional relationships and help him navigate challenging situations with greater confidence and composure. As he prepared for bed, Daniel felt a sense of peace. The confrontation with Miss Thompson had resolved the tension and opened a path for stronger communication and understanding. He knew that mistakes and awkward moments were part of life, but that they did not define a person's character or worth. With this realization, he drifted into a restful sleep, ready to face the days ahead with renewed confidence and a clearer perspective on both his work and his personal growth. In the days following the conversation, Daniel noticed a subtle but meaningful change in his relationship with Ms. Thompson. The tension that had weighed heavily on him for the past few days had lifted, replaced by a sense of professional respect and understanding. Each interaction with her no longer carried the anxiety of judgment or fear of criticism. Instead, Daniel began to feel a quiet confidence in how he approached his work. A sense of collaboration began to form. Ms. Thompson started to engage with Daniel in ways she hadn't before. She offered guidance more openly, shared insights about projects, and occasionally asked for his opinion during team discussions. Daniel noticed that her demeanor was professional yet approachable, creating a space where he felt comfortable contributing ideas without fear of ridicule. He realized that the brief, honest conversation had opened a door that allowed trust to grow between them. Daniel approached his tasks with renewed focus. He tackled challenging assignments with determination, knowing that Ms. Thompson recognized his effort and honesty. The fear of making mistakes had diminished, replaced by a thoughtful attention to detail and a willingness to learn. He felt encouraged to take initiative, proposing solutions and offering suggestions that he might have hesitated to share before. The once intimidating presence of Ms. Thompson now felt like guidance rather than scrutiny. One afternoon, while working on a complex project that involved coordinating with multiple departments, Daniel found himself needing advice. He approached Ms. Thompson, who listened patiently and provided constructive feedback. Her guidance was clear, yet she encouraged him to think independently and make decisions based on his judgment. Daniel appreciated this approach, feeling supported without being micromanaged. It was a balance that strengthened his confidence and allowed him to grow professionally. The small moments of interaction began to accumulate, creating a steady pattern of mutual respect. Ms. Thompson occasionally shared insights from her own experiences, stories of challenges she had faced and lessons she had learned. Daniel found these moments inspiring, seeing her not just as a boss, but as a mentor who genuinely wanted to help him succeed. He began to understand that leadership was not just about giving orders, but about fostering growth and confidence in others. Daniel also noticed a change in how he interacted with his colleagues. The improvement in his relationship with Ms. Thompson gave him a sense of security and self-assurance that carried. He contributed more openly during meetings, offered assistance to others, and engaged in collaborative problem-solving. His colleagues began to recognize his initiative and reliability, and he felt a growing sense of belonging within the team. The positive shift in his dynamic with Ms. Thompson had ripple effects that enhanced his overall work experience. During a particularly busy week, Daniel faced a high-pressure deadline for a project that involved multiple stakeholders. In the past, such situations would have filled him with anxiety, especially with the added worry about Ms. Thompson's perception. But now he approached the challenge methodically. He created a clear plan, prioritized tasks, and communicated openly with his team. Whenever he needed input or feedback, he consulted Ms. Thompson, who provided guidance while allowing him autonomy. The project was completed successfully, The experience reinforced his confidence in handling responsibilities under pressure. Daniel reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. He realized that the awkward incident and the subsequent conversation had been a turning point. It had been a catalyst for improved communication, mutual understanding, and professional growth. What had initially seemed like a potential setback had become an opportunity for learning, strengthening both his skills and his relationships within the office. As weeks turned into months, the professional rapport between Daniel and Miss Thompson continued to grow. Their interactions were now characterized by clear communication, mutual respect, and an understanding that occasional mistakes were part of human experience. Daniel no longer feared small missteps, knowing that honesty and accountability were valued above perfection. He felt empowered to take on new challenges, contribute ideas, and engage in meaningful problem-solving without the shadow of past embarrassment. Ms. Thompson, in turn, seemed to trust Daniel more. She delegated responsibilities, included him in strategic discussions, and sought his perspective on complex decisions. Daniel felt that his voice mattered and that his input was respected. This shift transformed his daily work experience, creating an environment where he could thrive and grow. The initial tension, once a source of stress, had been replaced by a productive, positive professional dynamic. Daniel also observed how the experience had changed him personally. He had learned the importance of addressing uncomfortable situations directly, rather than allowing anxiety to build silently. He understood that clear communication and honesty could resolve misunderstandings and prevent unnecessary stress. This lesson extended beyond the office, influencing how he approached challenges and relationships in his personal life. He felt more confident in confronting difficult conversations, expressing his thoughts clearly, and maintaining composure under pressure. During team meetings, Daniel noticed that his contributions were received with attention and respect. He felt a sense of pride in his work, not because he had avoided mistakes, but because he had learned to navigate challenges with integrity and professionalism. The growth he experienced was not just in skill, but in character. As he became more self-assured and capable of handling complex situations with calmness and clarity, the relationship with Ms. Thompson continued to serve as a model of professional mentorship. Daniel appreciated her balance of guidance and autonomy, her ability to provide constructive feedback without judgment, and her willingness to listen. Their interactions became opportunities for learning, reflection, and mutual respect. Daniel realized that the brief incident that had once caused him so much anxiety had ultimately strengthened his confidence, skills, and understanding of professional relationships. As time went on, Daniel found that he could approach challenges with a new perspective. He no longer saw mistakes as catastrophic, but as opportunities for growth and improvement. The supportive dynamic with Ms. Thompson allowed him to take risks, propose innovative ideas, and embrace learning experiences. He felt a sense of accomplishment not only in completing tasks successfully, but in developing the interpersonal and professional skills that would serve him throughout his career. By the end of this period, Daniel reflected on the profound impact of a single, honest conversation. What had initially felt like an uncomfortable, potentially damaging incident had transformed into a foundation for trust, collaboration, and personal growth. He understood that professional relationships could evolve positively through communication, empathy, and accountability. The experience had taught him that even moments of discomfort could lead to meaningful development. When approached with honesty and courage, Daniel's daily work life now carried a sense of balance and purpose. He approached tasks with confidence, interacted with colleagues with openness, and collaborated with Ms. Thompson in a way that was both productive and mutually respectful. The initial incident, once a source of anxiety and self-doubt, had ultimately paved the way for a more positive, enriching professional experience. Daniel felt grateful for the lessons learned and optimistic about the future, knowing that his relationship with Ms. Thompson had grown into one of trust, guidance, and shared commitment to success. Months had passed since the incident, and Daniel had grown in ways he could not have imagined. What began as a moment of embarrassment had turned into a significant turning point in his career. The awkward glance that once consumed his thoughts had faded into a memory, replaced by a strong sense of confidence and understanding. He now approached each day with renewed energy, Knowing that his relationship with Ms. Thompson had transformed into one built on trust, respect, and open communication, Daniel's work performance improved steadily. The lessons he had learned from the experience encouraged him to take initiative, voice his opinions, and embrace challenges with determination. He found himself leading projects that required collaboration across departments, and his suggestions were taken seriously. The confidence he gained from handling the earlier situation allowed him to navigate complex tasks with a calm, focused mindset. He realized that mistakes and minor lapses were natural, but addressing them honestly created stronger, more resilient professional relationships. Ms. Thompson's guidance continued to play a pivotal role in Daniel's development. She shared insights from her experiences, explaining how she had managed difficult situations in her career. Daniel listened carefully, absorbing her advice and applying it to his work. Their conversations were no longer tense or awkward. Instead, they were opportunities for learning and growth. Ms. Thompson's mentorship helped Daniel see the value of open dialogue, accountability, and perseverance. As Daniel's confidence grew, so did his ability to manage stress and pressure. Projects that would have previously seemed daunting now felt manageable. He had learned to focus on problem solving rather than worrying about how he might be perceived. This shift allowed him to contribute more effectively to his team, gaining the respect of colleagues who noticed his improved performance and professionalism. Daniel felt a deep sense of satisfaction in knowing that he could handle challenges without being paralyzed by fear or embarrassment. The transformation in Daniel's professional life extended to his personal development as well. He became more self-aware, understanding the impact of assumptions and overthinking on his behavior. The experience taught him the importance of honesty, communication, and humility. Daniel applied these lessons beyond the office, improving relationships with friends and family, and approaching conflicts with patience and clarity. The incident had been a catalyst for personal growth, shaping the way he navigated interactions in all areas of life. One afternoon, Daniel received recognition for his contributions to a major project. Ms. Thompson praised his dedication, insight, and ability to collaborate effectively with the team. She highlighted how his work had positively impacted the outcome and emphasized the importance of his growth and commitment. Daniel felt a sense of pride, not only for the recognition itself, but for the journey that had led him to this moment. The acknowledgement reinforced the idea that perseverance, honesty, and continuous improvement were valued and rewarded. The bond between Daniel and Ms. Thompson evolved into a professional partnership characterized by mutual respect. Daniel could approach her with questions, suggestions, or concerns without fear of judgment. Ms. Thompson provided guidance while encouraging independence, creating a supportive environment where Daniel felt empowered to take initiative. Their interactions became a model of effective communication, mentorship, and collaboration, demonstrating how a challenging moment, when addressed with honesty, could lead to meaningful growth. Daniel's colleagues also noticed the change in his demeanor and confidence. He became a resource for team members seeking advice or support, offering guidance and assistance with patience and clarity. His ability to navigate complex tasks, communicate effectively, and maintain composure under pressure made him a valuable team member. Daniel felt a sense of fulfillment in knowing that he had grown both as a professional and as a person, capable of contributing positively to the workplace culture. The incident, once a source of anxiety, had ultimately become a foundation for lasting lessons. Daniel reflected on how fear and overthinking had amplified the situation in his mind, and how direct, honest communication had transformed it into an opportunity for growth. He recognized that confronting uncomfortable moments, taking responsibility, and seeking clarity were essential skills that would serve him throughout his career. This understanding gave him confidence in handling future challenges with composure and integrity. As time went on, Daniel found himself mentoring newer team members. Sharing the lessons he had learned from his experience, he emphasized the importance of honesty, accountability, and addressing issues directly. He encouraged colleagues to view mistakes as opportunities for learning and to seek guidance when needed. Daniel's mentorship was informed by his own journey, and he found fulfillment in helping others navigate challenges with confidence and professionalism. The relationship with Ms. Thompson remained strong and positive. They continued to collaborate on projects, exchange ideas, and support each other's professional growth. The trust and understanding they had developed allowed for open dialogue, constructive feedback, and a shared commitment to achieving success. Daniel appreciated the mentorship, guidance, and respect that Ms. Thompson offered, recognizing that their professional relationship had become one of the most valuable aspects of his career. Daniel often reflected on the incident that had once caused him so much anxiety. He realized that it had been a pivotal moment, shaping his approach to work, relationships, and personal growth. The lessons learned were enduring. Honesty and accountability foster trust. Communication resolves tension, and challenges provide opportunities for development. He understood that growth often comes from uncomfortable situations, and that facing them directly is key to building resilience and confidence. In the present, Daniel approached his work with clarity and purpose. He embraced challenges with confidence, communicated openly with colleagues and leadership, and contributed meaningfully to team success. The anxiety and fear that had once dominated his thoughts were replaced by self-assurance and a commitment to professionalism. He knew that moments of discomfort were temporary, but the lessons learned from addressing them honestly and proactively were lasting. The story of the brief, awkward glance had evolved into a narrative of growth, trust, and professional development. Daniel had transformed from a nervous, self-conscious employee into a confident, capable professional, guided by the lessons of accountability and communication. His relationship with Ms. Thompson exemplified how challenges, when approached with honesty and integrity, could lead to meaningful change, stronger collaboration, and mutual respect. By the end of the journey, Daniel had not only overcome the embarrassment of the incident, but had also grown into a more confident and effective professional. He had learned that facing uncomfortable moments with honesty and courage could strengthen relationships and foster personal growth. The incident that once seemed like a setback had ultimately become a defining experience, shaping his career and his approach to life with lessons that would stay with him forever. Months had passed since the incident, and Daniel had grown in ways he could not have imagined. What began as a moment of embarrassment had turned into a significant turning point in his career. The awkward glance that once consumed his thoughts had faded into a memory, replaced by a strong sense of confidence and understanding. He now approached each day with renewed energy, knowing that his relationship with Ms. Thompson had transformed into one built on trust, respect, and open communication. Daniel's work performance improved steadily. The lessons he had learned from the experience encouraged him to take initiative, voice his opinions, and embrace challenges with determination. He found himself leading projects that required collaboration across departments, and his suggestions were taken seriously. The confidence he gained from handling the earlier situation allowed him to navigate complex tasks with a calm, focused mindset. He realized that mistakes and minor lapses were natural, but addressing them honestly created stronger, more resilient professional relationships. Ms. Thompson's guidance continued to play a pivotal role in Daniel's development. She shared insights from her experiences, explaining how she had managed difficult situations in her career. Daniel listened carefully, absorbing her advice and applying it to his work. Their conversations were no longer tense or awkward. Instead, there were opportunities for learning and growth. Ms. Thompson's mentorship helped Daniel see the value of open dialogue, accountability, and perseverance. As Daniel's confidence grew, so did his ability to manage stress and pressure. Projects that would have previously seemed daunting now felt manageable. He had learned to focus on problem solving rather than worrying about how he might be perceived. This shift allowed him to contribute more effectively to his team, gaining the respect of colleagues who noticed his improved performance and professionalism. Daniel felt a deep sense of satisfaction in knowing that he could handle challenges without being paralyzed by fear or embarrassment. The transformation in Daniel's professional life extended to his personal development as well. He became more self-aware, understanding the impact of assumptions and overthinking on his behavior. The experience taught him the importance of honesty, communication, and humility. Daniel applied these lessons beyond the office, improving relationships with friends and family, and approaching conflicts with patience and clarity. The incident had been a catalyst for personal growth, shaping the way he navigated interactions in all areas of life. One afternoon, Daniel received recognition for his contributions to a major project. Ms. Thompson praised his dedication, insight, and ability to collaborate effectively with the team. She highlighted how his work had positively impacted the outcome and emphasized the importance of his growth and commitment. Daniel felt a sense of pride, not only for the recognition itself, but for the journey that had led him to this moment. The acknowledgement reinforced the idea that perseverance, honesty, and continuous improvement were valued and rewarded. The bond between Daniel and Ms. Thompson evolved into a professional partnership characterized by mutual respect. Daniel could approach her with questions, suggestions, or concerns without fear of judgment. Ms. Thompson provided guidance while encouraging independence, creating a supportive environment where Daniel felt empowered to take initiative. Their interactions became a model of effective communication, mentorship, and collaboration, demonstrating how a challenging moment, when addressed with honesty, could lead to meaningful growth. Daniel's colleagues also noticed the change in his demeanor and confidence. He became a resource for team members seeking advice or support, offering guidance and assistance with patience and clarity. His ability to navigate complex tasks, communicate effectively, and maintain composure under pressure made him a valuable team member. Daniel felt a sense of fulfillment in knowing that he had grown both as a professional and as a person, capable of contributing positively to the workplace culture. The incident, once a source of anxiety, had ultimately become a foundation for lasting lessons. Daniel reflected on how fear and overthinking had amplified the situation in his mind, and how direct, honest communication had transformed it into an opportunity for growth. He recognized that confronting uncomfortable moments, taking responsibility, and seeking clarity were essential skills that would serve him throughout his career. This understanding gave him confidence in handling future challenges with composure and integrity. As time went on, Daniel found himself mentoring newer team members, sharing the lessons he had learned from his experience. He emphasized the importance of honesty, accountability, and addressing issues directly. He encouraged colleagues to view mistakes as opportunities for learning and to seek guidance when needed. Daniel's mentorship was informed by his own journey, and he found fulfillment in helping others navigate challenges with confidence and professionalism. The relationship with Ms. Thompson remained strong and positive. They continued to collaborate on projects, exchange ideas, and support each other's professional growth. The trust and understanding they had developed allowed for open dialogue, constructive feedback, and a shared commitment to achieving success. Daniel appreciated the mentorship, guidance, and respect that Ms. Thompson offered, recognizing that their professional relationship had become one of the most valuable aspects of his career. Daniel often reflected on the incident that had once caused him so much anxiety. He realized that it had been a pivotal moment, shaping his approach to work, relationships, and personal growth. The lessons learned were enduring. Honesty and accountability foster trust. Communication resolves tension, and challenges provide opportunities for development. He understood that growth often comes from uncomfortable situations, and that facing them directly is key to building resilience and confidence. In the present, Daniel approached his work with clarity and purpose. He embraced challenges with confidence, communicated openly with colleagues and leadership, and contributed meaningfully to team success. The anxiety and fear that had once dominated his thoughts were replaced by self-assurance and a commitment to professionalism. He knew that moments of discomfort were temporary, but the lessons learned from addressing them honestly and proactively were lasting. The story of the brief, awkward glance had evolved into a narrative of growth, trust, and professional development. Daniel had transformed from a nervous, self-conscious employee into a confident, capable professional, guided by the lessons of accountability and communication. His relationship with Ms. Thompson exemplified how challenges, when approached with honesty and integrity, could lead to meaningful change, stronger collaboration, and mutual respect. By the end of the journey, Daniel had not only overcome the embarrassment of the incident, but had also grown into a more confident and effective professional. He had learned that facing uncomfortable moments with honesty and courage could strengthen relationships and foster personal growth. The incident that once seemed like a setback had ultimately become a defining experience, shaping his career and his approach to life with lessons that would stay with him forever.